But we are going to make this pivot from taking all the work that we've been digging into when it comes to the teaching of writing and use that knowledge and energy and momentum, maybe for some of us, polish it up with positivity, because change work is hard. Shifting our instruction and thinking about how we assess kids and what it means to create a community of readers and writers. This is potentially stress-inducing work. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna apologize. I wrenched my back getting out of my car this morning, carrying these darn bags. And I'm trying to create a pressure point on it so that I can make it through the day. So I know I look like an injured bird because I'm an injured bird right now. But we're going to use that energy and that positivity to dig into the reading study for the next 3 hours. There will absolutely be opportunities to share and gather questions. There's always an exit ticket. All the exit ticket data gets saved back with Eric, gets saved with principals, and Crystal and I use that to inform how we plan future PD. And we're together again in a month and a few days, which is a really positive thing, I think, to dig into some consistent drumbeat of conversation. So I just want to power through. You should have a name tag on. Names matter. They help us. They help build community. If you didn't get 2 readings, we'll have extra readings down here in a minute. They're all scanned in the drive, so if you took a lot of them because you were afraid you'd never see them again, always, everything is in the drive. Today's bit.ly, MV FEB 14 materials with the M and the B and the F capital. And Eric is going to welcome us this morning. Thank you. Someone else besides me gets to be on the mic.
Okay, thank you.
Well, as Lisa said, first of all, welcome.
Okay.
I don't really have to wait to advance the slides, so let me start over here. I did appreciate everyone coming out here on Valentine's Day, and I know it's kind of extra, I heard it's stressful, but you're probably just tired from yesterday as well. So happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for coming out. I do think you're going to find today's in-service here both valuable and then later on in the buildings. I know the principals have been working hard to provide some PD that will be useful. I did want to remind everyone, because in the information I'm going to give you, I think this year's theme under construction definitely applies. I've always thought with our theme, we are already excellent, but it is something we always want to strive to be the best that we can. But we are still under construction. I did really want to review 3 things. Our DLT met this week, and we did discuss, to a certain degree, all 3 of these items. Hopefully these are items you've been hearing about in your buildings. The first one, the OIP plan. We have a 3-year plan, which is coming to an end this year. As I believe you're aware, we have, with our math curriculum, we have some pilots that are taking place. And of course, the point that you're here, we also are taking some work with respect to our ELA curriculum. This model, the middle school has kind of been using this term, and I think it kind of spilled over to our DLT discussion as far as crawl, walk, and run. And I think that kind of applies to today's work. I know it feels like you're running, but I do want to kind of let you know, as far as the district and as far as where we're at with it, with respect to expectations, we probably are much more at crawl level. With the district OIP, as far as where we're at, we have really gone back to the very beginning. And we are currently working on developing a vision. This vision is going to be shared with you. The vision is very much starting with trying to figure out what is our why. And Mr. Cedar has actually been sharing very much his vision and working with the DLT. And I would anticipate very much in the near future, once that vision has been completed, and you may have been hearing a bit about that vision development in your buildings, that it will be shared with you completely. Then after that, we will be very much into developing our plan that will be built off of that vision. With the math curriculum, we do have, and this got kind of messed up, we have two important dates coming up. Our math curriculum team and pilot teachers will meet on March 4th. Our DLT is scheduled to meet on March 11th. The two pilots that we are taking a look at right now are Eureka and Into Math. And I have a extension of where that decision could go. It could go as conservative as extend our current program. It could go that we need to look at other math pilots, or we could make a selection of one of these math pilots. Part of where our curriculum kind of has gotten confused over the years, we have some very strange adoption subscriptions to where the elementary needs to adopt soon. The middle school has been adopting at a different year, and the middle school or the high school is even at another spot. We were trying to get our adoption cycle back established. So we have been piloting programs all the way through the elementary and the secondary. I did also want to point out Lucy Calkins is supplemental at this point. We are still looking at journeys for the near future. I can say with journeys, which is the same issue with Go Math, both programs are coming to an end. I am going to get quotes for journeys to carry it out, but in a few years, neither journeys or Go Math will actually exist. So there's a certain point, I think those programs have had some strengths, but they are both coming to an end to the point where a decision has to be made. I did want to, again, thank you. As Lisa said, this will be a lot of work today, and I know you guys have been doing a lot of work on Lucy Calkins, and I also wanted to remind you, though, that President's Day is coming up, so you do have a 3-day weekend, so I hope you enjoy that as well. So that's it. And once again, thank you for your work here, and I do anticipate those decisions will be coming soon with respect to those 3 big items.
Thanks. I'm going to ask folks who didn't get 2 readings because they popped in later to just raise your hand up so we can put you on the late list. No, I'm just kidding. So Chris, I'm going to give you the readings that you need. And I'm going to just begin with the end in mind. What do we hope to do? Always to build a professional community, always working on building our knowledge of workshop structure. We're really going to be building on our writing workshop expertise and pivoting into reading, as I've already previewed. We really want you to feel like you walk away knowing the materials, the big concepts, and the tools and resources. So that's why we asked a precursor question. So some folks who've been like, I just got the reading units, I wasn't sure that our building had them or where they were. You'll stay down here with me and we'll do a slower walk through the materials. If you've already taught a unit and you know already, oh, here's how it's different than the writing units, and you know, I noticed that that assessment looks different, and here's some pieces that I've had some good questions because I've taught it. Then you'll be heading up to the library with Crystal and digging into conferences and mini lessons and probably a little bit of how to read a unit well as well, and some planning time. So we're really asking you to differentiate based on where you are, not by grade level, not by where your friends are, not by what school you're in, but just how comfortable you feel. If you've taught and are ready to dig in a little more deeply, not I'll go back to Eric's analogy, you can still be crawling, but you've already like gone to the edge of the rug and realized that the earth is flat. So that will be who heads up to the library with Crystal in a bit. And then we're always interested in the questions and how that's what's leading to differentiation today. That's what leads to the choice of activities that we do. Rather than being a lecture, the interactiveness, the opportunity, people like demos, people like videos. We need and want to hear from you so that we can do that work well. So, Eric already mentioned that it's Valentine's Day, and this is for some of us like, I hope I get something good from my newish boyfriend who still celebrates Valentine's Day, and then some of us have been married 26 years, and you're like, I hope he empties a dishwasher. That'd be the best Valentine's Day gift ever. But I actually am putting the hearts up there, not so much because of Valentine's Day, but because this work, and yes, the work of Lucy as a person, but the work at Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. So I'm really shifting my language. I'm not talking about the Calkins curriculum anymore. I'm talking about the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project curriculum. So Lucy's a person, but this is way bigger than one person. And I think that's especially important because Tim Shanahan and Lucy Calkins are in the middle of a humongous fight that they've been having for 20 years about what's the best way to teach reading and what does the science say, what do teachers say, and how do we value things. And so I'm trying to get above that fray, which is super interesting to me because I actually teach a class at the University of Illinois in Chicago, 4 offices down from Tim Shanahan's office. And so I'm like there in the School of Ed, like coming in from Cleveland, being all positive about, what does it mean to create teachers who think? And, Tim is on a very opposite end of this continuum. And it's really important, again, to recognize that this work in this curriculum is rooted in not just your relationships with students and families, but your relationships with each other. Because this curriculum, both of them, 3 of them, reading, writing, and the phonics curriculum, centers on collaboration, centers on the idea that we are looking at kids writing together, that we see each other teach mini lessons, that we are thinking about, what's on the Ohio State test this year together, that work of being in relationship with each other and then in relationship with our leaders is central to the success of implementation. So that's something I'm holding it in my heart, I'm holding it in my brain, I'm holding it in my actions and my hands as well. And so I really want to just name that. You've heard me say before, this is a thinking person's relationship-oriented curriculum. Every time I'm in front of you, I likely use that exact same phrase. So when that makes you feel prickly, we should unpack that. It should show up in your exit tickets. I'm a lone wolf. I don't want to be in a relationship with people. I'm a every man for him or herself kind of person. This will be tricky then, because this is a collaboration. This is relationship oriented. This is making your practice public, not because it's perfect, but because we know that we grow, that adults grow when doing that kind of work. So we just want to acknowledge that. Okay, so 10 seconds each. I'm Lisa Behe. I'm in from Cleveland. I'm always excited to be here because I have a deep and abiding connection to Kenyon College. Is that someone practicing saxophone? Just the water, I heard someone say, right? It'll go off in a second. I feel very lucky that I grew up in Teachers College work. From my teacher ed. I went to Lesley University, I had Irene Fountas in undergrad, so I had Literacy Collaborative, I went to New York City with my mentor teacher when I student taught and had the chance to sort of see workshop in action from the get-go, and then as I moved from coach to running a large nonprofit in Chicago, to principal and superintendent work, I kept that belief system in my very core, and I wear my heart on my sleeve around this work. So I'm thrilled to continue to be asked to be here, super excited to be working with Crystal. We're working in projects all over, which is amazing, to have a colleague in arms, to not be riding solo in the collaboration space. And one other thing that I want to add is that as we move through this work, we need and count on your questions, but as always, it could be that I'm like, that is a great question, I'm gonna have you write it on a Post-it note, because I don't like when people say that's not my pay grade, but as Eric alluded, there are conversations happening at the school and district level where I don't want to contradict that process in any way, shape, or form. I can definitely tell you 97% of how Teachers College would think about something. And questions matter. So I want to value both those things. But I cannot answer, well, how come my school blah, 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 or how come Mount Vernon this or that. But I really want to value those, and they need to show up on your exit tickets and on your Post-it notes as we move through. Okay, that was a minute and a half, so I'll give you a minute and a half too.
I was going to say, I don't know who your math teachers were, maybe you spent too much time in literacy. But I'm Crystal Funk, and I'm actually just coming from down the road. I spent some time with my parents last night in Warsaw, Ohio, so I went to Riverview. Started teaching in Texas, actually, and fell into literacy accidentally. I was a middle school math teacher. I went to Penn State, was recruited in Houston, and then when I left Houston, I went abroad and fell into literacy, and that's how I came across the reading writing units of study, and then eventually that turned into a principalship, and eventually that turned into a literacy reform agent, and now I'm here back in Ohio, back home, and working in literacy across Ohio, and I'm super excited to be in Mount Vernon. I always talk about, yeah, I have a school in Mount Vernon, it's near my hometown. So I'm always excited to come here and see you guys and see what's going on, and I'm super excited for the next few weeks that Lisa and I will be with you guys in your schools and hanging out with students, because that's my favorite part, actually. I love you guys too, but I really enjoy hanging out with the kids, so.
Okay, so what does our time together look like? We're going to be whole group till about 9:15. Then we're going to divide up into, we might actually take that to 9:30, take a break till 9:45. Then you're going to self-select. If you're new to workshop, you'll stay here. If you've taught at least a unit, you'll go upstairs with Crystal. That's self-selected. What do you need in order to continue to grow your knowledge of reading workshop? So we're going to do a quick turn and talk, start with an asset. I'm going to actually ask you to turn and talk to someone behind you rather than your teaching friend that you are likely sitting next to. So just try and build, we are trying to build community. So that's why we're going to crisscross instead of always elbow partner, right? So turn behind you, make eye contact. Maybe it's a triad based on how seating is. What's a strength you notice in your neighbors? And what's a challenge you're facing, okay?
Uh-oh. Yeah, you guys have to like down or something. Now you are. I know. There we go. Think I'm about
I'm going to make you make one.
Well, I was down in kindergarten.
Okay.
What's our question? That's not very
I'm going to ask you guys to be a triad and you guys to partner and close, okay? Thank you. Yep, so slide over here a smidge just so that you're not in a whole, she can still have an opinion though. Yes. Don't be nervous. You are a separate human than your mentor. There you go.
So I just want to remind us, you're having a conversation with one or two other people What's a strength you notice in your readers? What's a challenge you're seeing?
Just checking.
Okay, let me grab our attention, and then I'm gonna cold call, so sorry to torture you in this way, but I will. Janet, can you share a celebration?
We were talking about how number one is seeing how better the veterans believe possibly kindergarten. That's exactly what I do. So that's encouraging.
Awesome. So you're actually pulling like, oh, a bright spot that my partner shared with me that I'm thinking about as someone who will receive those kids. That's awesome. Thank you. Jenny, can you share a celebration? It could be your own. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm sorry. Plaid Jenny.
Should we say yes?
Comprehension skills with older children and working through that. And they're so proud of themselves for reading successfully, learning words. That's not a priority.
Yeah. I can decode and read accurately, but I don't understand what I read. But I'm done. Did I read it fast enough? Right, yeah. So pushing that idea of, and this is right out of a mini lesson, reading is thinking. And so part of what it means to be a great reader is to be able to know the sounds and the letters that make those sounds and put them together into words, and then read lots of words together in sentences with expression, and then be able to think about what you've read and actually make meaning from it, right? And that's a path that sometimes we inadvertently forget to reinforce. And sometimes, Crystal and I are working in CMSD, where they're a huge fan of AimsWeb, which very much values speed in reading. And it creates a tension that we have to live in as educators, when that full picture of, I know how letters and sounds work, I know how words work, I know how sentences work, and I know that I'm reading for meaning. And that means that I also have to use punctuation and inferences and background knowledge, even if I don't have great background knowledge. I'm still in that space where, like, we'll see in this mini lesson, like, I'm not quite sure what it means, but I get that that's an idiom right there. Okay, I'll take one more celebration. Lindsay. Lindsay's like, darn it, I should have made eye contact with her.
I feel like those mini lessons are just meeting all the kids' needs so nicely, and then you can just reiterate and keep working on it in your small group. Yeah. So it's been so nice just to introduce it to the whole class. I felt like before every group I was telling a lot of the same things to. When you do it all together, I feel like everybody's picking it up and you can.
So you're feeling some efficiency in the implementation of the units. Like, we've got a big picture place we're going, and hello, my struggling readers, I'm going to do this with you, and hello, my second language learners, and hello, my kids who have been absent, and hello, my high kids, and hello, my medium kids. And so, yes, you're like all on the same page. We're trying to understand theme. But then you're like, and you are reading books that barely have a beginning, middle, and end, but I'm going to help you figure this out. So that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that celebration, particularly about the units. I know that the challenges are going to come up for the next 2 hours, so it's important to name them and have them be in the room, but I actually want us to peek into a workshop classroom. So as most of you know, just like the writing units, Teachers College has video of reading units online as well. This is a second grade classroom that's in the middle of a
Doing pointer.
There we go. I don't want bread, I'm going to heaven. There we go. Okay, that is thinking about fluent reading, that's thinking about reading for meaning, and thinking about what they do when they get to a tricky part in a book. So we're going to see attention paid to all of those things. So what you're doing is just listening. You're watching, what are the kids doing? What's the teacher language? What do I notice about engagement? What do I notice about the texts that are being used? And just you're, as we might say to fourth grade readers, you're trying to gather the gist of this. How do you know that already, Kristen? Tell me what we were just doing with this.
I just said I'm glad. I was happy to hear. I saw what she was teaching whenever you pulled it over, and I'm like, oh wait, I like how that they do that because it
They're
correlates
scooping
into
up.
both,
Yes.
with the little posters and stuff that they're scooping words all along.
Yes, that phrase of scooping words, you're going to see it right here. I was like, she knows what scooping is. That's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to slide this back a smidge, and we're just going to watch about 3 minutes of this video.
Let's just read a few of these phrases together before we start our lesson. Remember yesterday we practiced saying them in a smooth voice? So let's read this one together really quickly. Actually, does anyone think they could read it by themselves in a smooth voice? How we like really scooped up line by line? Come on, do we want to try it? Okay, I'll do my invisible spoon pointer, okay? 1, 2, 3.
Honey is sweet, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee that made the honey. It has to be chased through the pages of the book.
Oh, that's beautiful line. And do you guys see how she's really been practicing scooping up each line and saying it smooth like a talking voice? So that was one of the tricky phrases we came across, and we said, oh, this doesn't really mean that you chase knowledge like you're like chasing it, like learning inside the book. It just means that to get knowledge, we need to read books. And he said, well, this is so important because we knew that Trisha's family loved reading, and Trisha was so excited to read. Do you remember that? Thumbs up if you remember that. Okay. So what I realized is I was thinking last night, and I was like reading a bunch of books. And even I was like rereading Dancing Meanings, I realized tricky phrases come up all the time in our books. And we're really good at figuring out the tricky words yesterday, and so I thought, oh, maybe we could use a little challenge today. We had a little practice in Mr. Fokker, but today I want to teach you that readers always stop at tricky phrases and try their best to understand them. They don't just like move on, because you know what? Those tricky phrases, I think the authors put them there to make us pay attention to something important that's going on in the story. So we can stop at tricky phrases and then really stop and ask, this doesn't make sense, but so what is the author really trying to tell us? Okay? What is the author really trying to tell us? Well, the first thing is you have to stop at a tricky page. So what I'm going to do right now is, I had so much fun reading this book with you yesterday, but I actually went home and reread all the pages that we read together.
FEB.
And I actually had a tricky phrase, just like in Mr. Fokker. I'd like us to actually figure this tricky phrase out together, because I feel like the author didn't just put it there by accident or just to trick us. They put it there because it's really important to the story. As I read, put a thumbs up when you think we should stop. Like, be like, how about no, not a thumbs up. Go like this. Everyone practice that. Like, give me like a stop sign when we think we need to stop and figure this out. Like, what is the author really trying to tell us? So it doesn't make too much sense. We're going to stop and figure it out and stretch our brains a little. You ready? Ready? This is my shoes with Uncle Red. Sassy, he said, you gotta look at that as a gift. Being tall means you can see all around, so you always find the right path to take. No, I said, it means I stick out like a big acne bump from someone's nose. I'll never get to dance. It's a waste of time to go to the audition. Listen, gal, said Uncle Red, if I was tall and pretty as you, I wouldn't need to wear red so people know it's me coming and going. All you gotta do is make your mark on the world, is walk into a room. I see some people went like this to stop sign. Do you guys think that's a tricky phrase? Chrissy, why do you think that's a tricky phrase? Why doesn't it make sense to you?
Because, like, some people don't know, what make your mark on the world means, so.
Yeah, what is the author really trying to tell us? I want you to think a little bit right now. And then I want you to actually stop and jot. Like, what's going on? Well, so far, what's going on in the story? Like, do you remember she just came back from the dance recital, right? And then the girls were teasing her. And then Uncle Red was in the car with her, and I'm thinking, he's saying this to her, so it must be important. What is it? What is Uncle trying to tell us? I want you to jot down what you think on the post-it one right now. And after you have a little time to jot, we'll turn and talk quickly about it. So jot first. What could it mean? Here's what you could write. You could write, this phrase could mean. What could it mean? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that.
Okay, I'm gonna stop us right there and have us not stop and jot, but I'm actually gonna have us just turn and talk to a partner nearby and share what you noticed about teacher language, mentor text, having a go work, or student engagement. Just turn and talk. This time you could be in a group of 3 or 4, but not a group of 6. What did you notice about that video? What did you notice? Sheet. This list of things in our on the PowerPoint. This idea that teacher language matters. The idea that we teach from a mentor text that has this sense of like, we've all read Thank You, Mr. Falker, and we just talk about the book like we're experts on it, and it's this shared text experience, and we're using it to become better readers, the same way we used it to become better writers. This idea that during a mini lesson, yes, the teacher is bossy. This is her time, but we also ask kids to have a go at some of the work, to try it, whether they're experts or not, whether there's video cameras or teachers, the principals, but someone sitting in the back of the room and the boom mic is over them. That's how we can hear the sound so well. But that there's that have a go aspect, that get with a partner and share what you're thinking, share your writing. What's going on for you right now? Find an example. That happens in writing and in reading workshop. And that student engagement, despite the fact that we all saw the kid in the soccer jersey doodling on his whiteboard, and he also had a whiteboard pen, so of course I want to be like, is that on purpose for him? Because how did he get the whiteboard and the whiteboard pen? I'm thinking she gave it to him, unless he snuck in with it. But, you know, she's got 27 kids in that class, so 1 out of 27, that's like still an A. But what does it look like to keep kids engaged in hard work? And for how long? That's a 3.5-minute segment. Do kids have to listen before they do? And that delicate balancing act of like, you need to listen really hard, I'm up here, and then you try it, right? So that idea that we want kids doing the hard work of listening and watching, and that we value and talk about that as part of their level of engagement, that makes it easier for them to have a go or to apply it later. This green sheet looks at aspects of both reading and writing workshop. We shared this in October as well. And there are things that do not change. Mentor text, we also have that in writing workshop. Having a go, we also have that in writing workshop. Tending to student engagement, thinking about precise, specific language that we commit to using as kinder, so when we get the first graders are like, I know what a small moment is because we did this last year. And then by the time we get to second grade, we're able to explode those small moment stories so that in third grade, we can actually write realistic fiction because we've all grown our muscles around that similar language. So this growth from writing to reading is a real strength for us this year. We'll feel as we step, for some of us are putting a toe into the water, for others we're gonna like, well, I'll try it after hanging out for a day, I'll try 6 days, I'll do 1 bend of teaching. You will have assets to draw from the writing workshop experiences you and your students have been having as well. I'm gonna actually put us into a quick writing workshop experience ourselves for about 15 minutes with a mini lesson, a work time, and a share time, so that we get to experience. Remember when we did this with writing workshop as well? So I'm gonna ask you to elbow bump your partners and say thank you, come up to back to where your spot is and put your 2 readings in front of, at the top of your stack, and raise your hand if you didn't grab 2 readings at the front end. Student teachers, you're allowed to have 2 readings, but does anyone else need one? Everyone's got 2 readings? Awesome. Okay. So, I'm going to set my timer for 4 minutes for this mini lesson. So this is going to be a hyper mini lesson. And I'm going to preview that when we go to work time and you're reading, you're not showing me your stamina of 40 minutes of reading time. You'll be only reading for 4 minutes as well, because we're really just going to make sure you know what the structure is and what it feels like. And this is actually a 2nd grade session that I'm teaching you. So if you're like, whoa, this is important, good work, I've never done this as a reader. No, I fib, it's a 1st grade session, right? It's a 1st grade session that I'm teaching you. So that you might feel like, whoa, that was good stuff. This is actually in the 1st grade curriculum, okay? So, I'm gonna start. Readers. We have been thinking so much about the brain work that happens when you read. And I put a couple of our Post-it notes up on this chart to remind us of that work that we've been doing. Things that we've been committed to as readers. Rereading endings of our texts and thinking, how did the trouble or how did the problem get fixed? Because we know how important those endings are to the work we do as readers. Also, stopping and thinking, what did Pigeon learn at the end of this book? What did Piggy learn at the end of this book? So thinking about what our characters' lessons are and what they realized and learned. And today, readers, I'm going to teach us to add one more thing. To predict, based on all we know about books and how they work, can you figure out, before you even read, what the lesson might be before you start? This is something that's so important because every one of you comes with tons of background knowledge. And I want you to tap that background knowledge and use it in strong ways as a reader. This is important though. In this classroom, you have a lot of choice. You get to pick the books you want to read. So I'm going to give a couple quick rules to think about as we think about bringing that all we know about the kind of text that we're reading. If you've got a nonfiction text with you, I want you to put it at the top of your text for a minute, of your stack. I see a few people like organizing. They're like, yes, that was that FDR speech, or I've got that Lucretia Mott biography. When you read a story, a text about an important person, or an important, Megan, yours is nonfiction right on top, or an important event, your brain is thinking, what's the most important thing that this speechwriter is saying? What's the most important thing about this person's life? Every time you read a biography or a true nonfiction text that way, you will be able to think, what's the most important thing about this person's life? What's the most important thing about this speech? Because always those writers are trying to give us a message or a lesson. Now, if you've got a myth in front of you, Narcissus is, I think, this is Narcissus and Echo. Mythology and fables and folk tales are famous for having lessons. So if you choose to read a folk tale or a fable or a myth, you know sometimes it's in the last line. So you know that lessons are automatically a part of that text. They always get plopped right in there. Remember when we were reading the Arnold Lobel Book of Fables? There's always that learning lesson for us. And these are sort of famous in that way. Myths and fables and legends. I'm going to make an anchor chart around that. I'm going to skip over poems just because I want to get to Jim on time today because I need that prep period, and instead take us to fiction pieces. So if you've got Those Shoes or Because of Winn-Dixie in front of you, put that on top of your text. We know that famous authors like Mary Beth Boltz and the amazing, phenomenal Kate DiCamillo write stories with heart. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. So when you already know the authors, that's another way you know Kate DiCamillo. I bet she's going to teach me something about relationships right here, because Kate DiCamillo loves relationship lessons. So when we know these authors, we bring that with us to the task as well. Readers, we have about 4 minutes of independent reading time today, and I bet you're not going to be surprised that as you read, I'm going to ask you to grab a pen. Sometimes we use Post-it notes, but today you're allowed to write on the text. And as you read, and I really want you to pick a text that you're interested in from the ones that you took from the front table. I want you to be thinking to yourself, what is the message in this text? And how did I start to learn it? Did I already have background knowledge that was helping me figure it out? Was there a character that was booming with that message? Or do you have enough time to read your piece twice and see if the message lives in that ending for you? I'm setting the timer for 4 minutes. I want everyone to be reading pen in hand this whole time. Thank you. Skim on our partner work and our sharing. So eyes on me so I can tell you what we're going to be doing next. You need your text and your brain and your partner. And in a moment you'll find that partner for a stand-up conversation. I'm going to say something that might surprise you. You don't need to have read the same text. So you're just looking for someone that you don't hang out with all the time, because we can all be partners with anyone in this class. And you and your partner are going to have a stand-up conversation that might surprise you, or if you've been paying attention to the past 14 mini lessons, maybe you've started to pick up that this is what we're working on right now. We are not going to retell what our text was about, even though we might want to share a sentence or two. What we're really going to focus on is that stem. I think the message in this text was blah, blah, blah. I think the message in this text was or is blah, blah, blah. Some of us want to quickly write a note about that to fill it in because we like to do a pre-write before we share with a partner. Others of us are learning how to just riff and go off. We've done so many great turn-in talks. You're starting to be able to talk right from what's happening in your brain. I think the message in this text is blah, blah, blah. Now, your partner will say, tell me more. Those are the 3 magic words we use in this room to keep the conversation going. Tell me more. And that's when you'll be able to point to the text and do some of your retelling to explain your thinking. Well, right here, the author does thus and such. Or here's a line that makes me think this or that. Text, partner, brain. I think the message in this text is blah, blah, blah. Partner, tell me more. And then you'll switch, and the other person will have a chance to share their thinking. If you don't have a partner, come up to the singles bar, and we'll find you one right quick. But transitions are going to be fast. So you are standing up, taking 4 steps away from where you're seating, making eye contact, and finding that partner and starting. I think the message in my text is blah, blah, blah. Tell me more. Okay, find those partners and I'll let you know when we have 2 minutes.
Just trade. Yeah, just trade seats. I just don't want to be sitting anymore.
What did you get?
Fred? Hey. That works. How are you running your first training? Sorry. Your friend Lisa. I'm like,
Okay, so
yeah, she's not afraid of anything. It's like,
is about, okay? But for sure the second person should be going now, okay? Person 2.
it's just his speech, really.
Readers, before we line up, I want to close our lesson. I want to make sure I have some pushes from leaning in and listening. I saw lots of folks able to identify themes, but this work of tell me more, even for us is hard, even 14 mini lessons into it. We're still trying to figure that piece out. So I want to let you know tomorrow when I read aloud, our turn and talks are really going to focus on some of that tell me more brain work that we need to do as a class to grow all of our reading muscles, okay? Who's my line leader today? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm going to pull out of that role play. And let me just ask folks, I'm going to put the map of the reading units to study, what workshop structure looks like, and ask if anyone has any wonderings about that experience or about where the lesson came from or reflections on the work that the units asked first graders to do. So any thoughts or reflections? I hope that there's some thinking going on right now on your end. So let me remind us that mini lessons, when they're not 4 minutes long, but so I can tell you exactly what we skipped. Today we've been working on thus and such. Today I'm going to teach you blah, blah, blah. This is just like writing. Watch me do it and explain it to you. And then I didn't actively engage, but I did give you the link to say, okay, now I need you to blah, blah, blah. I'm going to ask you to have a go at this teaching point. This is the exact same structure of mini lessons that we use in writing workshop. I whispered to Crystal while you guys were reading. I'm like, oh, I really want to pull a small group. But what we really let you do during this time is read, 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 read. Now, you aren't first graders, so none of you asked to go to the bathroom, none of you stole somebody else's story from them, no one took the highlighter and stuck it up your nose because you wanted to smell it. So you get an A+, but in our classrooms, the building of stamina for reading, the ability of kids to have enough volume, that's something that we have to grow. Because your read, 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 and reading looks excellent compared to sometimes what kids are ready for and what they've been asked to do. Sometimes kids come to us thinking that reading is filling out a worksheet. Like, oh, I'm not reading, I'm just waiting till you put the model on the overhead or the board and then I'll be copying it down into my worksheet as neatly as possible. So we want to make sure we're myth busting. Lots of time with books in hands in workshop. Books are the fuel of reading workshop. Texts matter. And then at the end, we did a little bit of sharing and I provided you with readerly feedback. But you also got a tiny bit of partner work in here to get some of your own talk in. There's our partner time, which is oftentimes, this is something that we don't see as much in writing workshops. Some units, but lots and lots of explaining your thinking as a reader built into the reading units of study. A little post-it note of advice on every single session for you there. And then my big readerly feedback and a promise to help us grow in this during our interactive read aloud. So that's an unpacking. Charlie?
Where do these books come from that the kids read? And my question is mostly based on the fact that a lot of classrooms don't. I mean, a lot of teachers gather books from everywhere they can, books from the library, etc. But like where do a lot of these books come from that, let's say, kids in this video are reading? Mm-hmm.
So I can tell you how many schools do it, but that question needs to show up on your exit ticket. I feel like we don't have enough books in my library that all my kids can have their nose in a book. Where will books come from? That is absolutely an essential question. Where do we get texts so that kids can read for 25 minutes?
Because those books need to come from your classroom library.
Yeah.
They're housed in your classroom. They stay in there. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds across genres.
that kids can read, which is the other piece. So if you're a first grade teacher, you know, if you buy some books from, if you're like, oh, it's the first grade friendship pack from Scholastic because I have bonus points, you might be able to read those books aloud, but there's a whole chunk of kids who are still reading at B, C, and D who can't access those texts. And so while they might picture walk a chrysanthemum, they can't spend 20 minutes thumbing through chrysanthemum during workshop time. You need to have books that are at kids' instructional and independent reading level. Any other thoughts or wonderings or ponderings? Yeah.
I was just gonna say, during the activity that we did, I liked that we did, even though we didn't all read like the same thing, that we were able to discuss the same, like principle that we were talking about, like the message. And so, you know, even though we didn't read the same thing, that we were still able to understand the message. And the tell me more part about where I found that in the text was able to be enough that the other person could understand why I would think that that was the message. So I like that we all read something different, but it wasn't meant for me to retell everything. It was just, I only need to be able to tell you what I thought it was. So let's say it was a text that maybe I had a hard time reading, or that I didn't know maybe every word, but I could kind of, like what you were saying, get the gist of, then I could still discuss something with my group and say that this is what I thought it was about.
I've got 2 things to respond on right away that I want to articulate that are important, and I bet you'll have a couple as well. The first is that kids are not, there are times when all second graders are reading series books. But some kids are reading Boxcar Children, and some kids are reading Henry and Mudge, and I'm trying to think of another second grade, or, you know, a series. And some kids are reading Mr. Putter and Tabby. The hook is that once we know, some kids are reading Elephant and Piggy, there you go. The hook is that once you understand how series books work, there's almost always an archetype of a character. The brave person, the nervous person, the glass half empty person, the let's put on a show in a barn person. And good readers, when they read series books, are better able to predict because you are figuring out how these characters act all the time. And then in 4th grade, that changes. Because one of the big things that happens as end of 3rd, 4th grade is that characters become more dynamic. So there's a whole series of lessons in 4th grade. Remember everything you learned about characters in series books? Guess what? There are also books where characters change. So someone is fearful and shy and off-putting at the beginning of the book, and they're different at the end of the book. And we're going to spend some time talking about how to hold both those things in our head. So nothing is, the units are not organized so that you need 28 copies of Thank You, Mr. Falker. That's the mentor text. But then kids apply it to books that are at their reading level. And the hard work we do is making sure, you've heard me tell this story, that like there isn't a kid reading Harry Potter all year that they can't actually read Harry Potter all year, but thank goodness they're being quiet, right? So we really keep our finger on the pulse of what have kids chosen. In fact, Crystal and I were laughing that like fiction, first text gone from the table. So if you were my class, I could be thinking, gosh, am I lifting up poetry and informational text enough, or am I like all about Kevin Hankes, and therefore all my kids are like, bring on the fiction. And I need to start perking up a little bit more about mythology and folktales and fairy tales and fables and poetry and informational text, because I'm creating readers who only want to read Elephant and Piggy books, and I need to shift that. So we get the opportunity to gather data. What did you choose? What did you choose? What did you choose? What did you choose? And trends in our room as well.
I was just going to add that some of the magic around this curriculum with the units of study is exactly what you said, that everyone's reading their choice. So they've chosen something that hopefully is at a level that they can read, but they're still able to show the skill that was taught. at whatever level that is. And then they're able to share that with their peers and share what they're reading and give the evidence that proves their thinking.
And I'm gonna take that word hopefully. The way you move that into a definitely is by the work we do during workshop, which is, when part of the slam of workshop teaching and how I first started teaching in workshop 25 years ago was, while the kids read, I also read. I modeled good reading, and I sat next to a kid who was a struggling reader, and I might have read his book to him. Or I walked around the room and I touched everyone on the shoulder and said, I can see you love reading. Great job. Oh my goodness. Thank you for being such a good friend and sharing those books. And I didn't confer, and I didn't have a clipboard, and I definitely didn't give kids feedback to help them grow. I was like, oh, once again, Haley has a Junie B. Jones book, and again, and again, and again. That must be where she wants to be right now. And now we've shifted so that what are kids reading? How do you know they're reading it well? And what do they need next to grow as readers? And what do they need next to make a different book choice? That becomes our responsibility. So this is a thinking person's curriculum, because sometimes that choice is the publisher's choice. But in writing workshop and in reading workshop, we believe in student agency. We believe that that's what gets kids ready from kinder to third to sixth to eighth to be really ready to be successful in high school. There has to be agency and choice in the process before they get to ninth grade. Any other questions? Yeah.
During small group work, will every child participate in a small group each day, or?
No, not each day, unless you can have some sort of magical time wand. We as educators have to look at the kids in our class and decide, oh my gosh, I have 2 second language learners who've never attended school before. I'm gonna need to touch base with them every day for 3 minutes at the start of work time, because they're like, huh? And I need to settle in with them. And here are my 2 kids with IEPs, and my specialist is coming in. Oh, sorry. And my intervention specialist is coming in, but oh my goodness, her daughter had a baby and she's out for 3 weeks. So now I have to figure out how to support them, and it might be like, I'm taking 4 of them. I'm taking you guys on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you guys on Thursday, Friday. And then to think about, what strategy groups do I need? What guided reading groups do I need? It's gonna feel very similar to writing workshop. List your kids on the left-hand side. Start to figure out who needs what. You'll use a conferring form to start to make those decisions about how often you see which kids and for what purpose. Okay, I'm going to take us into a couple really important ahas that are necessary. And I do want to remind people one more time, where is this deck? It is at bit.ly/MVFEB14 materials, with the M and the V and the F capitalized. And it'll take you into this folder that has everything for K2 and everything for 3-5 right in it. So there's no hiding anything from anyone. Okay, reading workshop is only a component. Do you need to see it one more time? It's right there. Okay. Reading workshop is a component of the reading day. It is not the entire reading day. You also need to be doing interactive read aloud. You also need to be doing shared reading, and you also need to be doing word study in systematic ways. These pieces create the reading block, and you'll also have a writing block. So I thought for sure one question would be like, where does this fit into our schedule? This is really important grade level and school-based conversations to have. If all of this is going to be part of our work, or I want to have a go at it for 2 weeks, just want to teach this for 2 weeks and see what it feels like. In addition to doing workshop time, you'll also do interactive read aloud, you'll also do shared reading, and you'll also do word study. Interactive read aloud and shared reading has a very specific definition. If you guys have been literacy collaborative, it's going to feel a lot like the Fountas and Pinnell definitions in large text, kids' voices joining for shared reading, interactive read aloud, book choice matters, really important to build in turn and talk. It's not just listening, it's not head down drawing after lunch so that the kids are quiet. It has that component of this is a teaching time. Not that you don't also want chapter books after lunch, heads down, everybody quiet as well. But that's not the, you need an instructional interactive read aloud. So this idea that reading instruction isn't just reading workshop. That is a piece of it. That is a piece of what that reading block looks like. But reading workshop by itself would not be sufficient reading instruction for kids. You have to have these other components in play as well. When we break down into our afternoon section, we'll get right into the text and learn more about each of these. I do not know why my clicker is not working. So, what key practices from writing would we pay forward? First, if you haven't done so, the same way you registered your kit online for writing, you register your kit online for reading, and the same way you register the other grade level kits like I taught you to do. If you're a kindergarten person, you're gonna also upload first grade, and you might as well upload second grade because it takes about 70 seconds. If you're a second grade person, you wanna get back to school and swipe someone's third grade kit. You know how to do this. There's a card inside the units that tells you have to have the spiral bound unit 1 because it's going to say what's the first word on page 92. So you have to have the first unit with you because it doesn't want you to cheat. So you want to register your materials online because anchor charts are there and videos are there and other really helpful stuff is there. Just like the writing units, every unit begins with a welcome to the unit that is the power fuel for the unit. In reading, it's called the orientation. You can't teach the unit without reading the orientation. It's like 6 pages instead of 3 pages now, and it really digs in saying, Bend 1, Bend 2, Bend 3, assessment, advice for shared reading, advice for read aloud. I've already talked about,
materials to prepare. So if there's certain books that you want to get organized for a certain genre, for the unit, it'll walk you through that too. And it'll give you good ideas for extra mentor text for read alouds. And also it'll walk you through organization of library if there's something to do that is suggested to do differently than you've already done.
Awesome. Bullet 3, this is collegial work. You know, just like in writing where you get together and look at student work and think about how are we using the checklist and what will we do next and are there things I need to reteach and oh my gosh, this part was really hard, how come they didn't get elaboration but your kids did? You do that same kind of work, problem solving in a collegial setting with grade level colleagues. Crystal just told us supplies and materials, that part. You need to be thoughtful about it on the front end because you don't want to get to Bend 2 and be like, wait, I'm supposed to have 6 baskets of weather books? You know, all of that is in the orientation and critically important. Just like in writing, it ends with celebrations. There's plenty of opportunities to do the same things we should be doing right now with families. Ask your kid about our mentor text. Ask your kid about our mini lesson. Here is an anchor chart from our classroom. Here is a 1-minute video I made and I dojoed or reminded or whatever technology you're using. I made it to to share with families so that they know what our writing instruction looks like. Hey, it's the end of the unit. Come in and see what we've been working on. That same belief system, and there's actually even more of a section on working with families in the reading units. So you guys have heard me say this before. I help and support implementation of workshop in settings with very few English-speaking parents, very few custodial parents, high poverty communities, and it is possible for us when parents are like, now it's been 2 years of getting these texts about mini lessons, now I'm actually going to figure this stuff out, because parents don't have to learn something new every year. Consistent language, consistent expectations for kids, consistent writing rubrics, consistent structures. This is part of what helps families understand our belief system, when it isn't like, I got someone who really loves social studies. Not me, I got someone who really only teaches math, so it seems. This helps create a systemic approach for families as well as for us and inside our school. You guys have also heard me shout out the Facebook community that's around for the units of study. That is where so much problem solving happens. This is not a passive curriculum. You don't unwrap the shrink wrap and never think about it again. People are constantly saying, there's a great new mentor text we can use. I created the checklist in Polish. Is anyone working with Polish families? Because now it's been translated, which is a huge thing in Chicago because we have such a high immigrant population across Eastern European countries. You know, there is consistent positive problem solving happening. I'm an intervention specialist. I'm retiring in a year. I don't have any books. How did you get your first Donors Choose project funded? How do you work with your library? All of that is shared in those Facebook communities. And so being an active participant doesn't mean you have to post up. It can just mean that you're reading and skimming. And in some schools, they take turns. Your job is to read it in January. Your job is to read in February. Your job is to read in March, so that you don't, miss something. Lastly, talking about the challenges. Charlie, where are the books going to come from? What does the schedule look like? What about kindergartners who didn't go to preschool? Naming those challenges, lifting them up on your exit tickets, as we've done all through the writing process. That's what's led to these site visits, moving out of this gym, super fun, or cafeteria, great to be here. Where do I want to be? Where does Crystal want to be? In schools. That's where the work is. This is lovely. I always love our snacks, but what I really love is when we're in classrooms and you're like, well, I'd love to see you get those kids to turn and talk. And we do some of this myth busting. We see what interactive read aloud or what mini lessons that are mini with human being children look like. So they keep pushing your questions and concerns and ideas and celebrations so that we can use them to fuel the implementation. It's a real, not every district responds to what teachers share on exit tickets. We are seeing that here. That's a good thing. And a shout out for everyone who's letting us be a part of that work in their classroom. We really appreciate that. So, I got us back on schedule. It's a Christmas miracle. Well, no, I didn't. I fibbed. I'm only 7 minutes off now. So, why don't we take a break, and instead of at 9:30, at 9:40, you want to head, if you're a person who's new to reading workshop, but you're like, I took the shrink wrap off to show up today, or I did a couple lessons with it, or I just want to start from the get-go, you'll stay here. If you feel like, who just gave an example? You knew what scooping was. You need to be going upstairs, right? Because you've clearly done something. Someone else shared an example. Crystal will take a group that's already done some work, has maybe some specific implementation questions, and then we will start back up again. I will ask folks who are down here, we're going to consolidate, not leave lots of empty spaces for people so that my voice and my back can last till 3 o'clock today. Okay, one last thing. We're not coming together again. We'll dismiss from our rooms. if you are one of the host teachers, and if you don't know what that means, it probably means you're not one of them, but several of you have either been volunteered or you were voluntold that either Crystal or I will be working in your classroom when we're on site in the schools. We're doing 6 days in the next 4 weeks, so it's going to be this like intense once or twice a week. One of us will be in buildings.
I'm going to do an orientation to the unit. I'm going to talk about how to read a unit of study in the Spiral Bound book, and then I'll be digging into effective mini lessons. The K2 materials are similar but not the same as the reading materials are similar but not the same as the writing materials. So I want to ask you to slide everything out, stack the Spiral Bound books. Those are your units, and we'll get to them in a minute. If you order them with Post-it notes, you can go the Post-it notes to the side, or the sheet of paper that says how to get online with the units of study. So that's all tucked in there. So you'll see that there's not a Pathways book. Remember the Writing Pathways book? So there isn't a Pathways book because we use Lucy Teachers College uses a lens of leveled reading, not checklists to think about kids as readers. So if you're familiar with Fountas and Pinnell's benchmark assessment system, or with DRA, which someone told me they're using, that's still a part of the way you will still assess kids. And we'll talk about that when we dig in. So you'll see that we have 2 professional books, a guide to the reading workshop, and an if-then curriculum book. The if-then curriculum book, different than the writing units, is just units. And those units are more fleshed out than they are in the writing book, in the if-then writing book, because they are the opportunity for you to have resources if you're noticing trends in your kids. So I'm going to go back to the guide and ask everybody to open the if-then curriculum book. It's K2, so we all have the same one of these K2 kids. If you open it up to Roman numeral IV, that's 4, you'll see the wide variety of units that are in here. So if you need to, and I'm noticing two of these are also available in PDF format online when you see the little mouse finger thing. How many of you are using a Fountas and Pinnell or DRA-like leveling system where you're like, I have a group of kids reading an E, right? So this will be very familiar to you. So if you have lots of kids still at level A, whether you're a kinder or first grade teacher, there's an extra unit on that. If you have kids at levels C through G who need to deepen their work around nonfiction, you have a little extra unit on that. If you have kids that are sort of stuck at CDE and need extra support working through tricky parts, you have a unit on that. So you can see that it references, it's 3 pages long, it references the level of the kids. So if you find yourself with a trend in your classroom and you're supposed to be going to this next, but it feels like too much, you can actually dig in to one of the if-then units. And by the time you hit the 2nd year of implementation, many schools recognize, we teach in a community where hardly any of our kindergartners go to preschools that are learning oriented. Lots of our kids go to daycare, and they're not spending tons of time with eyes on text. Now let me be very clear. I do not want kids doing alphabet worksheets in daycare or preschool. I do not want them tracing their name. I'm just saying as a noticing, if there's not a lot of literacy in the home, by the time you hit your 2nd year, you might be like, we're just always going to teach this unit because we know it's a good fit or our school, or the community, or the families that we're serving. So once you build up your knowledge and muscles, you'll start to say, oh, our scope and sequence is going to be a little bit different than the one Teachers College recommends in New York City, because we serve X population, or we've noticed our kids really need a nonfiction boost. So we really want to push that nonfiction into first grade rather than wait till second grade when they're only 1 year away from third grade reading guarantee. Not every state has third grade reading guarantee. We do. So we are thinking more about what happens in second grade because of this high stakes, high accountability test that our kids take in third grade. So the If-Then book is filled with extra, bonus, shorter than the spiral bound, but longer than the writing units that are here to help us use our data to help us think, what do our kids need next? Okay, questions about the If-Then book? Okay, so then the only other thing that I want to make sure that folks are aware of is that this is a K2 book, and it doesn't have, like the writing units do, the scope of the whole year for kinder, or for first, or for second grade. Okay, so we're going to tuck this one away, so put it back in, and we're going to go to a guide to the reading workshop, and this might be where you need to pull Post-it notes out. So this is the professional book. And you heard me say this about the writing workshop text. It's kind of non-negotiable that you have to at least know where things are in here, because this is where the philosophy and the practice and the management and the leveling and the assessment knowledge lives. Something different than was true the very first time I met you guys 2 years ago, is you can now buy this book by itself. So if there's an intervention specialist, or a long-term substitute, or another reason why someone on the team should have this book, you can say to the principal, Lisa said this is available now. This feels like it would be really valuable for our whole school to have if we're going to be moving towards the units of study implementation. Leave no teacher behind, right? So this book it's super important, and just like in the writing units, the table of contents is crucial. So, inside front cover is how to get online on all the other, on the online places. And we've done that lots because we've already done writing. So table of contents is on page III. And you can use a pen or a highlighter or a Post-it note, but I'm gonna make a series of recommendations around this table of contents. So we'll be flipping back and forth between the first page of the chapter and the chapter. So, chapters 1, 2, and 3 are overview and philosophy chapters. When folks will say to you, well, why are you doing this instead of a basal? Or, what's so great about workshop? Our kids can't handle that. These 3 chapters is where the philosophy of the program lives, and where the idea that kids need to be reading meaningful, authentic text, and say not just black and white copied excerpts the way Core Knowledge ELA works. This is where you get the meat out of the bones. Moving from it's just good for kids, to and research says, and there's actually these 10 tenets. And if you're thinking strategically, which I hope as educators you are, if you're thinking about your parent newsletter and what you need to share with families about how teaching and learning happens in your classroom, or you're an intervention specialist and you need to really know and understand what the philosophy of this program is so that you can align interventions to it, these chapters would feel urgent to you. These are places where you'd want to read pen in hand. Okay, chapter 4 is a mini reading methods class. So it has, let's go to page 28 for a second. This is the section of the book that starts us off way at pre-readers and walks us through what's happening for BRs or pre-As or whatever your leveling system here calls them, and what kids need to know about how print contains a message and books in print and how it works. What we want kids to know and understand about the joy and passion and commitment of being a reader. And then, starting on page 34, it will walk you through, here's what A and B readers are working on, here's what C and D readers are working on, here's what GHI readers are working on. So it takes you all the way through with some examples of sessions or lessons or small groups of here's what these kids are good at, and here's the gist of what they're working on to continue their development as readers. And I want to be really clear, as we've said multiple times today, it's not just their ability to decode at that level, it's their ability to think and write and talk to show their understanding of what they read as well. So it isn't just about the accuracy rate. I can read a J at 97% accuracy, but it's also, you can explain the problem solution when someone says tell you more or ask you for text evidence, you can start to infer. So this is not just accuracy rate, this is matched with comprehension work as well. So this is that chapter if you are new to leveling or you're trying to unpack what are the most important pieces of kinder. You can read the A, B, C, D sections and sort of be like, oh, I'm going to put some of these bullets in a parent newsletter to help them think about what they could be doing at home with their kiddos. Yeah, Charlie.
Do you see a difference between this and Fontainebleau literacy curriculum? Which is really highly detailed about each level. I mean, is there an advantage?
Oh yeah, the kid, Teachers College will be like, if you have FEB, the Fontainebleau Continuum, get it out right now, because that's these 4 pages on steroids. I sleep with my continuum with me. Like, the continuum, this is the overview. The continuum is a deep dive, level by, I was going to say letter by letter, but it's really level by level. So they'll shout out Irene and Gay, and they'll say, if you are starting from scratch and have the choice, we recommend you buy the benchmark assessment system. They share the same publisher, they are very much aware of each other's work. Okay, so chapter 5. This is the chapter where I mentioned that it will be important to recognize that reading workshop alone is not the only part of your reading day. That you're also doing read aloud, you're also doing word study, you're also doing shared reading in kinder, first and second. So there's a bit of a dive into what that looks like here. Chapter 6 is the assessment chapter. This is a non-negotiable read if you move into implementation. So by the time we're together in March and the district has made the decision, or teachers have decided, or schools have decided, whatever the structure might be, we will be diving into this assessment chapter. And I actually think this is where they shout out Bountiful Pinnell, is in this chapter. I think they get a mention in 4 and a real shout out in this chapter. So this is really to know your kids well as readers. Here are some of the things we think you need to pay attention to. And so this is a really terrific chapter and is tiring because it's a reminder of like, oh my gosh, I'm doing conferencing notes and I'm having kids write about reading and I should be taking running records, formative, not just summative. You know, this is a good reminder of all the things that we intend to do an interest survey at the beginning of the year because we know that's part of being a reader. And then you're like, oh, I'm just going to pay attention to which book baskets are the busiest. So this is some really good insights on everything from level to stamina. So a really powerful and important chapter. So you'll see, I'm gonna mention something, I'm just gonna put it out there. Teachers College has created, in the absence of a leveling, in the absence of your school owning BAS or DRA, or Jen Saravallo now has a new reading assessment, they've actually, do I have any reading recovery people in here, people who've done reading recovery? So, Caden, Kaeden, is a famous reading recovery publisher. And Caden has a set of leveled books, A through M or something like that. And Teachers College has worked out a deal with them that if you buy the Caden book set, you can free download all the running record forms and the comprehension questions and the scoring guide for that series of Caden books. So Caden is selling them as like a bundle, and if you go to the Container Store and buy yourself a something, you can fit it all in a little bin, and that way, if you don't have DRA or BAS or Jen's work, you have something that's like, I gotta sit with this reader and do a cold read, but I read all my B books already. So you keep those books out of the library and out of your read aloud, and then you've always got a cold read. It's an imperfect hack, like most hacks. And it won't last for 3 years, like most hacks. The electrical tape will eventually fall apart. But it's a really great short term, like, our school doesn't have DRA or BAS, or we used to, but so-and-so retired and I think she put it in her trunk when she left. So this idea that we must know kids' reading levels amongst other things, like their stamina, their volume, their interest, their engagement, those are all also important to get the full picture of a reader. So you can see how long this chapter is. It's a long one, but it is, the reading units are not assessment free. They are assessment rich. In fact, once you're really implementing well, you're like, I don't actually want to know one more thing about you as a reader. I just want you all to put your heads down so I can analyze this data for a bit and figure out what the heck we're doing next week. So you're collecting formative data, you're taking running records, you're using observation data. This is a reason why lots of IB schools and Montessori schools choose to use the units of study, because IB schools have something called a learner profile, and if you're in an IB school or an IB district, you're really expecting to find out about your kids, more about your kid than just like they're an instructional J. Same thing with Montessori, the whole child, so you are an observer. So, P.S. Okay, so chapter 7. If you're like, blah, 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 Lisa, I'm committed to having a go with this, those last 2 weeks before spring break. Chapter 7 is the mini lesson chapter. Remember how we also read this chapter in writing, where you were just like, if I'm gonna have a go and try and do something well, you wanna teach a good mini lesson. That's when you're like calling the kids to the rug and saying like, okay kids, hunker down with me here. I'm gonna try and figure something out with you for the next 5 days. And this first part's the mini lesson, just like we do in writing. So pay attention up here with the anchor charts and the mentor text. We all know we're gonna fake it till we make it, friends, right? So this chapter, this mini lesson chapter, helps you pivot from the good mini lessons that you're doing in writing workshop to strong reading workshop mini lessons. So it will have some guidance on what a good mini lesson looks like, and then it'll deep dive, page 82 with me if you can. We've already said, same 4 things. We've been working on blah, blah, blah. That's the connection. Today I'm going to teach you how to yada, yada. That's the teaching point. Watch me yada, yada. That's the teaching. You try yada, yadaing. That's active engagement. Now, go forth and yada, yada. That's the link. And that happens in, 10 to 12 minutes. The reading mini lessons are written to be briefer. Thank you very much, Teachers College. So they won't feel as unwieldy, but you will still hear about Lucy walking on the beach and picking up sea glass every so often, so take it all with a grain of salt. And then the rest of the chapter walks you through all of those parts of the mini lesson, the 4 parts, which, remembering the teaching point is the end of the connect. Okay, so then, if you are feeling pretty new to all of this, and you really can't do one more thing till you think about the book baskets, Chapter 8 is the chapter for you. This is the chapter on the systems and structures and routines, including supplies, but also sort of the intellectual work, like making partners, or how do you organize share time. This is the chapter on managing the systems and structures, routines, materials, and supplies. That's chapter 8. Some of us are super practical, so that feels really comforting to read that chapter first. A group already came up to me and was like, what about guided reading, and what about our book bins? And those are great questions, good things to consider. Chapter 9 delves into, during work time, what do small groups look like? I'm going to say something that's going to feel really controversial, and I'll stop to see if there's questions or pushes. I already said, I went to Leslie. I grew up with Fountas and Pinnell, literally. I then taught in Chicago, worked for the University of Chicago, sat in a PLC with Gay Sue Pinnell, who flew into Chicago to work with us, and then came and did videos of my classroom with Pat Scherer from the Literacy Collab team. Like, I get that F&P piece, Fountas and Pinnell piece, big time. There is tension for me, someone who worships and adores the continuum and guided reading, shifting my practice to sometimes pull groups that are strategy groups, where I have a J and a D and an L and a new kid. And we're all hunkered down, and I've got that mentor text in front of me, and I'm teaching kids across levels in a strategy group. I'm like, how about just like 2 Ds and 2 Es? That would make me feel much better, even though I know we don't label kids. We don't level kids, we level books. So I should say, what about 2 kids reading at a D and 2 kids reading at an E? So I'm gonna fix myself, even F and P really remind us of that. So this chapter is one that I, even in my expertise, am constantly thinking, what does small group look like as I shift more fully into workshop? What role does guided reading play? What role does conferring play? What role does heterogeneous strategy groups play? And one thing that's helped me tremendously, does anyone know Jennifer Saravallo's work? Yeah, Jen Saravallo was the champion for this at Teachers College, and she's now no longer a staff developer, but if you pull up her reading strategies book or her writing strategies book, both of which are dedicated to Lucy Calkins, so you can see the influence she's had. Jen Saravallo, watching her, if you follow her on Facebook, she posts up dozens of lessons of kids at different levels working for 6 minutes on a strategy. So this idea that small group work in workshop will include guided reading, and will also include strategy groups that are heterogeneous groups working on some of the things that you've taught in mini lessons. I'm just naming the leap. So I'm still leaping there, right? I'm like, give me your class list, sort by column B, level, and I'll show you how to make your small groups. And the team at Teachers College wants us to be able to let go of some of that and start to think in different ways. If that sounds horrible to you, just go ahead and skip over chapter 9 for now, because I don't want to stress you out. But I do want you to know that that's a part of the work. And when we're in classrooms, I think we're doing a lot of writing demos when we're here, but if we get the chance to do some reading demos, you'll see either Crystal or I have a go at this. And we both have a ton of video of ours. We videotapes ourselves all the time. So if you're super curious about what this looks like, go to Jen Saravallo first. She's the expert. But also you could email Crystal or I to be like, okay, Miss Smarty Pants, I'd love to see you teach a multi-level group. Okay, so what happens during work time? Small groups, and then chapter 10, conferring. Getting one-on-one with kids, doing that research, decide, teach, structure, super familiar to us from writing workshop, leaning in and listening and working with kids and giving them a push to help them grow. So that's the conferring chapter. Then, this is a hot button issue in America and in Ohio right now because of all the dyslexia stuff going on, especially in the Columbus area. This is a big issue, and I'm sure it's going to rear its head because the NCTE and Dublin Literacy Conference are both at the same time this weekend, which is just mesmerizing to me that they're at the same time. But if you're following some of the conversations happening in Ohio right now, we have a need to think more strategically about how kids learn about the sounds and the print and the corresponding graphophonemic awareness, as well as how to manipulate all of those things. I can manipulate the sounds, I can manipulate both as I hear them and as I speak them, and I can manipulate them in print. And then I can also figure out how they work on the page. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. And it's complicated work that Teachers College is like, we raise our hand. We want to be involved in complicated work. That's a space they love. And if you're on Facebook, there's probably 3 or 4 posts a week about this stuff happening in America and in the TC space. Here's the word study chapter if you want to unpack that a little bit. Then, I mentioned earlier that you can go back to chapter 4 or 5 for the big picture of the Literacy Day. Chapter 12 is about shared reading. Chapter 13 is about reading aloud so that you can see what those components look like in the TC space. If you are a learning specialist or an intervention specialist, chapter 14 is your chapter. Not that all of us reg ed people don't need to also be reading it as well, but what does it look like to differentiate well in workshop structure? And that chapter ends with a very powerful statement that differentiation is key to kids being successful. Hence, workshop. So that every kid isn't doing the same thing. So differentiation is the undergirding principle of this kind of instruction. And then goo-gobs of references, and then inside back cover, more work, including on the right-hand side, Teachers College is putting together libraries. They sell them as shelves, so that schools that are raising money and pushing dollars against this don't have to go to Amazon and figure out okay, so Elephant and Piggy, what else should I put in the cart? Teachers College is supporting that work with product as well. This book is important. I walked you through it slowly and talked about each chapter, not to waste time, but because it's so crucial. And in a few minutes, we'll have some independent reading time. Questions, Sherry?
Chapter 14 also includes differentiating for BSL students? Is there a separate section in one of these books?
Yep, okay. There is a huge section now in general resources in the online section about supporting ELs and including translations into Spanish of, I believe, Polish is on the Facebook page. Hmong is on the Facebook page, which is tons of Minneapolis is a huge site. I believe that people in Boston have done both Portuguese and Haitian Creole. I mean, what you have to do if you're hey, we have a lot of families that speak blah, blah, blah. Has anyone done this yet? Is you have to put it on Facebook, because chances are you're not the only person who's looking for those resources. And people, if it's been done, people won't be mean. They'll be let me just show you how to check the resources before you post a question, because lots of stuff is there. Yeah, so, and I pay attention to the languages either where I've taught or where I support. But it, just because I don't know it, it doesn't, just because I don't know that it's done, doesn't mean that it hasn't been done. Okay, so we're gonna grab any unit of study. So if you're sharing, pass out a spiral bound book to the people next to you so they can also have one, because I want everyone to have one. Okay, everyone have one in front of them. Open it up. The inside front cover, left-hand side, lists all the sessions. Just like writing workshop, a session is a days of teaching. So you can look at a glance at how many days long the unit is. And we know that some days might take and all of these days can't take 2 days, but some of them might take 2 days as you get started. You might have to add, oh my gosh, we had a fire drill in the middle of this, we didn't actually get our time in, and, but you can get sort of at a glance. The units are meant to be about 25, 26 days long. So the 4 spiral bound units aren't enough for your whole year. You are also teaching from the if-then over the course of your year as well. Teachers College creates a scope and sequence every year with their recommendations of what a year of workshop teaching, reading, writing, and word study looks like. And they match and produce things so that when you're doing X in writing workshop, you're doing Y in reading workshop, and there's alignment. It feels coherent. The bends are powerful, and I keep saying I would love for one of the outcomes for this to be that folks who haven't been doing stuff much with reading workshop are like, I'm just going to pick one of these units and teach the first bend. Because it's just, you're not going to harm the kids in any way, and you will come to March 20th so much wiser about the tools and resources and how the units work. So, can I just borrow yours for a second, Amy, because you're right here. So Amy just randomly has meeting characters and learning lessons, a study of story elements. So if you're, this is first grade, so this, I'm guessing like many kids could still work on story elements at this point in first grade. So this isn't like the high frequency word unit, although you might be like, oh yeah, my kids could use that too. And the first bend is called Going on Reading Adventures. Kids use the storyline to predict, they retell to retain the story, and they revisit books, they reread so that they notice more, and they link the pages that go together in their brain. And then there's one on getting ready. So my push is, that's a bend, it's 5 days work. If you were to teach that, you would start to feel like, oh, now I really know how this is organized, and I'm seeing the languages, and I'm making connections to the writing components. You don't have to teach that whole unit before March 20th to start to build up some muscle or some opinion or some good questions. You can just teach a bend. Just like in writing, the units are organized into bends so that when you call the kids to the rug, you can say, so we're at the very beginning, friends, and our big ideas for these past 4 or 5 days have been blah, blah, blah. And then when you head into bend 2, you can say, readers, we have been so focused on this piece, kiss your brain, we are ready to move on. I've got a big new idea for us. And it's the next bend, the next grade bar. So, sessions, individual lessons, bends, clusters of lessons aligned to some big ideas that you can and should share. And then, the very bottom of each, you'll see that it says, read aloud and shared reading. Does it say read aloud and shared reading? I want to say, can I have everybody's eyes for a second? That doesn't mean that you do read aloud and shared reading at the end of the unit. It just means that in this book, the read aloud and shared reading pages are after the last session. So I want to make sure that you don't think like, oh, I teach those 21 days and then I do 4 days of read aloud and 4 days of shared reading. You do shared reading and read aloud along with reading workshop. Those pages just happen to be after the last session. So that's super important. Okay, third or fourth time saying this, so I'll keep it brief. You must read the orientation to the unit. It's the heart and soul of understanding what you're doing, even if you're only going to teach one bend. You should read the orientation and the guidance on that bend. It's super important that you dig into the orientation because it's where you learn things like, if you're supporting ELs, here's some advice for this unit. If you, this book centers on a text where, this is a fourth grade example where the parent has died and the kid is feeling traumatized around that. We want to make sure you know that before you start the unit. Has all these insights and hints on supplies and materials and ideas and concepts and kids. You never skip the orientation. Then, just like the writing units, every session has that little post-it note. Things that you need to teach this day. Then the mini lesson, labeled with all parts. Then the conferring small group and partner time immediately after. Mini lesson, work time, and then a page of insights on how to run your shares. So this is organized just like the writing workshops are. And then at the tail end, after the last session, are 6 or 7 pages of how to do read aloud aligned to the big ideas, and insights on doing shared reading aligned to these big ideas. I want to make sure that I mention that it doesn't give you lesson plans for 22 read alouds. It gives you lesson plans for 1 and sometimes 2 and 3. And you have to do the work to then apply that to other books in your classroom library or other books that you gather for read aloud. It will always have lists of suggested titles. So it'll say, we're doing this with, I keep using Henry and Munch, we're doing this with Henry and Munch, but you could also do this with Mr. Putter and Tabby, or with Frog and Toad, or with Elephant and Piggy. It will help you pivot. It will say, we really love using Patricia Polacco here, but you could also use Eve Bunting or Chris Robinson. So, you know, just know that this very brief bit of shared reading or read aloud won't get you through the unit. Okay, that's how to read a unit of study. So now, as we go into about 20 minutes of work time, I want to ask you to pick what makes sense for you to do. You can read about mini lessons. That's how to do an effective mini lesson. Go back to a guide to the reading workshop, and if you're gonna start somewhere, that's a great place to start. But maybe Bonnie wants to read the differentiation piece because she's an intervention specialist. Or maybe you are super pumped about that emergent A unit in the if-then book, and you're like, I got nothing but A's as the day is long, so I want to read that. Or maybe you're like, she keeps harassing us to have a go at one bend, so I'm just going to pick one of these 4 units that I think my kids would like, and I'm going to read that orientation to the unit and have a go at that bend. You can also hop into the Vimeo site and watch more video, or you can go online to heinemann.com, register your unit, and just like the writing units, a very nice person comes online and says, I'm imagining you sitting with your grade level colleagues, each of you with your reading kits in front of you, and I'm here to tell you all about what's in the kinder reading units of study. There's a video for first grade with all of that, there's a video for second grade, and third and fourth and fifth and sixth. So if you're a visual or auditory learner, you might not want to sit and read for the next 20 minutes. You might rather watch the video. Sign up and watch the video. What we are going to do is come back for some talk time when we have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to, did I put it up here? I'm going to butterfly confer. We're going to read for 20 minutes. I left it blank. And then we will come back, hopefully with grade level partners, to talk about what we did. I'll set the timer for 17 minutes, so we know when there's 3 minutes left, but this is your work time. please, please find what's meaningful for you, or if you're questioning what's meaningful for you, raise your hand right away and be like, I'm a thus and such, what do you think I should read? Or let me tell you about my kids, what do you think they should do? What should I do to support them? I have 2 extra events and a guide to the reading workshop and all of the first grade units here. So if folks want to borrow something, they can feel free to do that. Okay, 17 minutes and we'll have a 3-minute warning. Be sure to
spend the next few minutes hunkering down or standing up, depending on what your energy is,
with a grade level colleague. So if you're sitting with a friend, but not someone who is your grade level right now, I do want to ask us just to have a chance to have like a first grade discussion, a kindergarten discussion, to lift our level of knowledge and sharing. So if folks can find that grade level partner, that role-alike partner, so that you can have a quick conversation. If you are really, I'm just looking at you and I'm like, I almost hate you're like, the book is open, you've got a post-it note, you're flipping through something. If you just want to work for the next 6 minutes, you can do that too. Because I hate to make Cassie move right now. But if you're ready to talk about what you read, or about what you think your action item might be, now is the time to raise the level of conversation, okay? So kindergarten folks, find some other kindergarten folks so I can help match if you need it, but let's have some quick conversations.
Amy going over there. Journeys, whatever we're doing in Journeys, she's created all of these resources, you know.
One of the most powerful things, I just want to grab everyone's attention,
is seeing this circle come together, or a cluster of intervention specialists brainstorming, like how do we get kids understanding that they're not learning skills in isolation, but we're talking about transfer. This collegial work, this is part of the implementation. That's why when we're together on March 20th, I love making a good presentation. I could just do interactive read aloud for 3 hours straight. But this time, where we're problem solving and digging in and sharing, as long as we are focused on solutions and not helping each other muddle deeper, as long as we're really lifting each other up into like, how could we do this, as opposed to why do we have to do this, then we're heading in a good place. I just want to name our closing task is to share your feedback. I can't say it again. We need your questions and energy and momentum and concerns and celebrations. That will help us plan our time together, both when we're back in schools, and I think by the time we're together March 20th, we'll have video. Because Crystal and I are all in schools along the way between now and March 20th as well. Videos of Mount Vernon kids doing this work in Mount Vernon schools and Mount Vernon classrooms. So there's the feedback form that you need to pull up on the phone or Chromebook. You need to capitalize the F and capitalize the M and the V. Please think about staying in relationship with your team, continuing to do reading, and ways you want to connect with us again on March 20th as you fill this out. That is our last step. If you are a host teacher, we're going to be headed upstairs to the library in about 3 or 4 minutes. So please share your feedback so we can continue to grow from that feedback. And then we are wrapped. So thank you for good energy and attention and questions this morning.